having me here today. I'm very happy to talk about automating governance across multi-cloud environments at Datadog. Is that okay? Can you see my slides? I guess you can.
Yes, perfect.
Perfect then. So who am I? I'm a senior cloud security engineer at Datadog. And as a background, I have more than 10 years of experience in various security domains and activities. Like I worked on different things, like securing mobile networks, developing security tooling for third-party teams. I was also a SOC analyst. And lately, I've been partnering more closely with infra teams to make the cloud more secure. When I'm not at work, I do board games, some of them online. So who is Datadog? Datadog is a leading observability and security SaaS platform. So it gives observability and actions on your cloud resources. And the focus of the team that I am part of, cloud security team, is to secure Datadog's own footprints. So we want to define the security baselines that apply to us. We want to identify our own resources that have risky configurations. And we want to enforce automatically, whenever it's possible, secure configurations for these resources. So let's discuss a bit more the use cases that we want to answer, and we'll see how Cloud Custodian can fill them. So we want to assess and improve our security posture based on our baseline, so have observability on everything and enforcement capabilities. But we want also to be able to enforce best practices. One of them, for example, is that we want to have resource tags with owner information on cloud resources. It's not as such security best practice, it's more hygiene, IT best practice. So we want to know who we can reach out to in case there is a problem on a resource. We want also that these toolings that we're looking for can help us reduce costs. One use case that we have is to improve bug cleanup. So when a POC is delivered, sometimes not all resources are deleted. And so they cost us money for nothing. That's something that we want to track and want to be able to delete these resources easier, in an easier way. We want a tool that can be an enabler for third-party teams. It can be teams that are hands-on. It can be teams that are less hands-on and are not as accustomed to writing code. And last but not least, we want all of that to be in a single pane of glass. So we want to know what the security posture of the org is. We want to know also what are the security policies that we use and which are the accounts or cloud environments where they apply. To answer that, we need also to take into account our own Datadog specifics. Our company is 100% cloud-based, and when I say cloud-based, it's actually multi-cloud. So we are present in all the major cloud providers, and we need some tooling that's able to cover all of them. And volumetry is also a topic for us because we have thousands of containers, users, IPs, VMs, no matter what it is, what cloud resource you consider, we have a lot of them. So we will need to have some tooling that's able to scale as much as we do. So observability and enforcement was a journey for us. We had previously some homegrown tooling that was developed in-house. It was efficient in the sense that we could pinpoint faulty resources and remediate them, but it was difficult to extend the tool because rules and engines were intertwined. And so it made the barrier to writing new policies high. And it was difficult also for teams that don't write code on a day-to-day to write their own policy for this tool. So we thought that Cloud Custodian was a very nice replacement for this tooling. It's a powerful and easy to deploy framework. The main selling point for us is that Cloud Custodian makes rule writing and understanding very easy because it's just a couple of YAML files that are very easy to read. All the cloud providers, the major ones, are covered. So the level of features is a bit different depending on the cloud provider you consider, but there are monthly releases that bridge the gap little by little. It's mostly scalable. For some of our use cases, we still have throttling errors, but for the majority of them, it's handled gracefully and we can cover really the scale that we operate at. So it fits our requirements. And last but not least, it's open source with a maintained code base and extensibility, and I'll talk a bit more about it at the end of the talk. We run Cloud Custodian as a Kubernetes cron job because we have a very big Kubernetes footprint. We use C7org as a tool because it's easy to cover lots of cloud environments and lots of policies with that. And so this tooling just takes into account two configuration files, one that lists all the requirements for the accounts to scan and to enforce, and the policy.yaml that explains what we want to find and how we want to remediate these resources. So as an example here, I just listed two policies, like one to find S3 buckets for which public SCL block is off, and one to find security groups that are too permissive. I didn't put any actions block there, but it's also something that we can add in the future. So now that we discussed what we want to achieve and how Cloud Custodian can help us do that, let's see first how we can leverage it to manage exceptions. Exceptions are known deviations from the security baseline for cloud resources. And let's first discuss why we need them in the first place. So exceptions are needed to address some business cases sometimes. Let's say that you need to serve public content. Having an open read-only S3 bucket addresses this business need, and such a bucket would be added to the exception list because in all other cases, it would be deemed dangerous. It can also be an enabler to deploy policies gradually because you can just exclude resources that feel a bit weird, like they have an ownership that's shared between teams and you want to tackle them maybe not in the first run, but in a second phase of your project. Our feedback on exception management is that it's always best to have everything in a single place so that you have the big picture of all the exceptions in your cloud environments in one place. It's always good to have the team name and the reason why you added the exception. It makes it easy in the future to revisit this list, so to know who to reach out to in case you need to make sure that this exception is still valid, and to make sure that it was maybe part of an ongoing project to change like the design or the architecture of something. So having the reason also helps you understand why it was back then an exception and if it should still be one. Team names and scopes change over time, so that can be a challenge even if you document them to keep that list very relevant over time, and hence revisit this list regularly to make sure that it keeps being up to date. So, okay, we need to have exceptions. We have Cloud Custodian. Can Cloud Custodian be leveraged to use, in an exception process? We found that it's actually, yes, it's possible. Our requirements was that we wanted to reuse the same source of truth for exception as our legacy tooling. So here is an example of resources that we know are non-deviations and that we want to take as an input for Cloud Custodian. Let's see how we did that. So Cloud Custodian has two configuration files in the way we run it, and let's first begin with the accounts.yaml. For each of the accounts or each of the cloud environments that we want to scan and where we want to enforce actions, we will define variables. The name of the variable depends on the type of cloud resource we want to have exceptions for, like S3 exception and SG exception in this example. And the values of these variables is a list with the names of resources that are known exceptions. These variables are scoped by account, so you can have different contents for these variables depending on account A and account B, which makes it very flexible for you. Then we can go to the policy.yaml. Now that we have defined variables, let's use them in policies. We can add to the filters section a filter to filter out resources whose name is part of the S3 exception or security group exceptions that we defined before. And that way we will exclude de facto the resources that were known as exceptions. If you take a closer look, you can see that the key, so the field that's used to exclude resources is different for security groups. It's a group ID, and for S3 buckets, it's a name. So Cloud Custodian gives you the flexibility to choose which is the field that you want to use to exclude resources from your scans and your enforcements. That's the whole picture altogether, with accounts.yaml defining exceptions and the content of them, and policy.yaml showing how to use these variables to exclude known exceptions. We want also to keep this process as simple as possible, so we don't want to add manually in the accounts.yaml or policy.yaml any exceptions that we know. We want just to keep them in their simplest form. To do that, we create a script at runtime or in an init container to take the accounts.yml and the exceptions.yml and create a new file with all the exceptions. That way, it's very, it's much less error prone and much better to do it. And we do similarly for policies to have it all covered. So we saw that we can actually exclude exceptions very easily from Cloud Custodian scans and actions. Let's see which precautions we took now and which lesson we learned when we turned down enforcement for Cloud Custodian policies. Of course, that's the next step. We want to secure configurations. We want to shorten the window of opportunity for attackers to attack our faulty resources. And doing that in an automated fashion is also less frictions for teams because they just have to opt in for this process and they don't need to go through all their resources and to change all their configurations one by one. Here is a checklist that we have for this kind of effort. That's what we did, and we thought it was useful to share that with any other companies that's interested in doing the same. So before the change, communicate proactively with all the stakeholders. If you have like ceremonies like OKR plannings and PI plannings, make sure that everyone knows what you're about to do. And that's also a very good moment to explain why you are doing it, when it will happen, and how you will change the configuration of infringing resources. If possible, get a policy approved by major stakeholders so that everyone is on the same page. That's the perfect time for teams to actually mark their resources as exception if that's needed. And you can show them that these exceptions are actually excluded from your scans. So you can create dashboards, metrics to show that these exceptions are not included in the scope that you cover. So you can also remediate the resources beforehand, which is very helpful if you use infrastructure as code. If you don't do that, then you will have drifts because Cloud Custodian will change the configuration of resources on the field, and the configuration that's in Terraform will be different. So being in relationship with teams, having this discussion with them makes it easy to remediate resources beforehand if that's needed. Measure the security posture. It would be useful to show that your action had an impact and that you drove down, for example, the number of faulty resources by resource type or by account or by environment. And the last point that I think is most important is to prepare a rollback strategy. So we've seen before that we can add exceptions to Cloud Custodian, but actually, if you enforced a cloud resource that you were not supposed to, adding it as an exception after the fact is not enough, because it just means that it will not be remediated again, but it will not bring it back to the state it was before. To do that, you need to know the state it was before. And that's lucky for you because Cloud Custodian logs the state of the resource in resources.json, so you can leverage it. You should also make sure that you have the necessary permissions to update the state of this resource to its previous configuration. So for example, if you have an S3 bucket and you removed a public access to it, make sure that you know exactly what was the previous configuration in terms of access and make sure you have the IAM permissions to update this access to the previous state. Then you can launch Cloud Custodian in non-dry run mode with actions block, and it will change the states of your resources. So announce the change proactively and address any concerns if there are any. After the change, hopefully you will show improvement on the security posture, so you will have less faulty resources, and you can repeat this for bigger and bigger scopes. So the good news is that it gets better because the initial enforcement needs very careful planning, and you need to build some tooling around observability, some tooling to roll back changes. You need to earn trust from teams. You need to do a lot of things. But little by little, when you show that actually you master this process, you can expand the scope more easily, and incremental enforcement is better because first you have the trust of teams, and also because well, it's just incremental, so you have less resources that you will update and change over time. Here are a few tips for a successful enforcement campaign. If that's an option for you, to not remove resources immediately. So for example, let's say that you want to find unused VMs because you want to drive down costs. Instead of just removing it, shut it down first, wait for a few days, make sure that no one claims it. And if no one claims it, delete it. It's much easier in case someone actually needed it to go back to the state it was before, like used, than if you delete it and then it's just completely lost. This still lowers the security risk. So if this VM was deemed to be insecure, the fact that it's shut down makes it not accessible from an attacker. Iterate, start small and expand your reach while you earn trust from teams and you earn confidence in your process. And that's it for enforcement. So we've seen together how to leverage Cloud Custodian full potential to gain observability on all your resources and to enhance your security posture. But sometimes, what if Cloud Custodian is not tailored exactly for your use case? So now I'd like to briefly go over my experience as a contributor to Cloud Custodian. I want to emphasize, I just did a couple of PRs, 5 of them, and only 3 were merged domains. So really, I'm not a maintainer. I'm just a hobbyist on Cloud Custodian. And that's really what I want to talk about. I feel like it was a really smooth process, even for someone who is not involved on a day-to-day with Cloud Custodian, to have new features or bug fixes added to the code base. The main advice I have is to check early that the features that you need or the bug fix that you are working on is actually not already covered. Ask questions in Cloud Custodian Slack channel. I thought it was really helpful and very smooth. So 2 of the PRs I wrote were actually for something that was already implemented, and that's a shame. Don't do that. Also, the usual means like docs, GitLab issues are absolutely valid too. The review process was fast, smooth. Some reviews for cloud providers. Well, review time depends on the cloud provider that you implement a fix or a feature for, so be prepared for that. But overall, it was a great experience, an amazing learning opportunity. With monthly releases, your change will make it to the release very soon. And it also improved our usage internally of Cloud Custodian and our ability to address new use cases because we had new capabilities. Let's summarize now what we went over. So in a nutshell, Datadog runs Cloud Custodian at scale for all our major cloud environments. We have exception management in place. It enables us to have gradual enforcement. So we do enforcement too on cloud providers, and it drives down the number of vulnerable resources. And we extended Cloud Custodian with new capabilities to serve better our use cases. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, thank you so much, Isabelle. I know we are coming up a break, but I would definitely like to take a few questions. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Especially, it's great. Like, I don't know if it's going to work, like the call sign here. Like, I know Zoom doesn't work for me, but thank you so much for sharing your contribution experience. What I really liked about your presentation was that you also talked about the multi-step workflows. A lot of times people perceive custodian as a tool that can just turn things on and off. But the real cool thing about custodian is that it allows you to do exception management, which really helps you automate across the board, right? And then you can take 2 or 3 steps, notify before remediate and that kind of stuff. That makes it a really unique tool out there. But thank you so much for sharing the story. I did have a couple of quick questions. Are you using it for FinOps yet or just for security?
We use it for FinOps, especially for POC cleanup. So we have some accounts that are used for POC and we remove resources that are unused for a number of days. So we have a policy stating that internally we pinpoint these resources and we remove them after some time. We can keep them as exceptions. Like if you have a business need for which you don't want this resource to be removed, you can mark them as such, but all of the other resources will be removed. So that's a FinOps need too.
Great. Yeah, we hope to get your FinOps team to use it as well. I know there's been a question around integrating Datadog logs with Custodian. I don't know if you can comment on that, or I know it keeps coming up, and a question by Chris came too. I'm not sure if it was answered by Kapil or not. Kapil, you can unmute too, but Isabelle, I'll let you have a first crack at it.
So on our side, what we do is parse the resources.json that's created by Cloud Custodian at each run, and that creates logs that we send to Datadog. So we log with Datadog to actually have more insights about what Cloud Custodian really does. I think I have a couple of slides maybe about it, like that's here. So that's just an example of, you see my slides, right?
Yeah, we see
Yeah.
stuff.
So just an example of what kind of logs we create. So we have the time when it was run. We know what is a cloud provider and the account it was run against. We know if the policy had an action block, if the resource is an exception, and we log also the resource configuration in this block resource configuration. So that makes it easy for us to go back to the previous state of the resource in case we needed to, and it logs how it was configured before we took any enforcement on the resource.
Great, thank you so much.